Where do I start? This is the ultimate question that I always and frequently get from accidental entrepreneurs, but it comes in many forms. I'm going to shift now to Q&A, and 6 questions came in, and these are among the most frequently asked questions that I receive from accidental entrepreneurs. And that's really an aspiring business founder who has an idea, a skill, a passion, but they're not quite sure where to start. I'll share each of these questions along with my responses, and be sure to stay to the end. I'll share a secret that you absolutely should know if you're going to launch a business this year. Let's get into it. How should I set up pricing for a service-based business? You're going to really want to tune into this if you're a graphic designer, a photographer, maybe a social media manager, copywriter, bookkeeping and finance services, lawyers, consultants. Really, the list goes on. But what they have in common is that there's a service being provided and there's a fee for that service. A lot of times it requires expertise, and there may be an ocean of providers out there at all different price points. So 2 pitfalls that can come into place when figuring out how to price a service-based business. First is to charge by the hour. This is really more of a job than it is a business because it's kind of like being self-employed. So you're charging per hour, you're giving your services, you're essentially selling your time. And so that can be a pitfall, mainly because eventually you run out of hours to sell. If you're doing a side hustle, or if you're performing the service as a side hustle, that means you already have a full-time job. You may have other responsibilities. You may have a family, things that you want to do, and so forth, which means the number of hours you have to sell are limited. So if you're pricing by the hour, you're going to run out of time, or you're going to hit a wall in terms of how much you can generate with the business. But if you can find a different way to produce revenue based on your expertise, but at the same time, you can leverage your time to be a one-to-many type of formula where you provide an hour of your work and that actually relates to many people. So that can be things like providing online learning. It can be things like providing packages or deliverables-based offerings where you can do them very quickly, but it'd be very time-consuming for others. And so you can produce that really valuable service. And at the same time, you're getting paid for your expertise, not just for your time. The second pitfall is not charging enough. So this often comes into play when someone's just getting started and they're not really sure what they're worth, and they can really undervalue their expertise in this situation and almost kind of move into this commodity positioning. Like, well, I provide the service, but so many other people provide the service, and I was out on Fiverr and someone's doing it for $15 an hour or $20 an hour. And it just seems like, how can I ever make money doing this? Well, one thing I find is most providers, especially early on, don't even charge the going rate for their work. So if you are going to charge by hour, at least make sure you're charging the going rate for someone with your level of expertise, and recognize that you're probably going to form relationships with the people you do work for. Unless you're going out to a Fiverr or some kind of a platform that's just brokering that service, you will look like a commodity. It's very difficult to differentiate what you're doing in that case. So avoiding that commodity approach and at least starting out by charging what is the going rate for this service. What you'll find, though, looking back at the first pitfall, if you find a way to charge for your work or to price your work or price your service in a way that doesn't involve selling your hours, this is where you're really going to be able to increase how much you make, because you're going to be able to price based on value. And that brings us to the difference between cost plus pricing versus value-based pricing. And there are lots of other models as well, but these two I think are the most understandable early on. And what most providers, really most businesses do, is they figure out what does it cost to produce the good, the service, whatever it is, and then add some profit on top of that, add a margin. And so that is one way to determine pricing. And if you're selling something that people can get in a lot of different places, or if you are positioning your service as kind of a generic service, then you may need to do some form of this, because the market will have already really dictated what the price point is. And so again, this is where cost plus pricing can lead you back into those pitfalls of undercharging for what you do or getting too focused in on selling your hours. So value-based pricing can be a very powerful way to really maximize the the amount of money that you're making for the work that you're doing. I did a video a while back on this called 10x your hourly rate. And really the goal of that video, and I'll just share briefly here, is to look at how can you determine the value of the service you're delivering for a particular customer, and then price it based on that. A lot of times that's going to give you the opportunity to go with premium pricing and to really position what you're doing as a solution to a problem rather than a per hour service or a commodity type of an offering. So with value-based pricing, you'll look at what problem am I solving and how valuable is that? Is it a big pain point for the customer, and how much would they pay to relieve that pain? Because something that might take you 10 minutes to do might be a problem where someone has been putting it off, or they just don't want to do it and they just feel like it's not worthy of their time, or it's really daunting or scary. And so for them, it might be worth $1,000. And for you, it might be one of the simplest things. So really understanding the customer, understanding what they need, and understanding the value they place on it, and being able to say, I can fix that problem for this price, and it's based on the value. And this can be really helpful if there are things that you can do to add some extras to that really make it value added to the customer. And so it's highly valuable to them. It's not a big lift for you to deliver the service. And that way you can maximize how much money you make by providing that service. So you can think of this in terms of premium packages or subscriptions, things where you're providing not just one thing, but a group of services around a particular problem, providing a specific solution and doing it at a single price point. And if it's a one-time project, it might be the price for that project. Or if it's some kind of subscription or ongoing offering, it's almost like you want to create a box, a package that looks almost like a product in a sense, even though it's a service you're delivering. And put as much as you can into that box, and essentially you're selling that box of things. If you've ever read the book by Alex Hormozi called $100 Million Offers, and several other books and a lot of content provided there, what Hormozi does is talks about the offer. What is your offer? I've heard him say many times, you put so much into this box, into the offer, and you charge so little for it that people feel stupid saying no. So this can be really a good way to figure out what are all the things that you can do, the value that you can provide, and put that in, put a price on it for that box or that offering level or that subscription or what have you. There's also what's called the Goldilocks effect when you can provide 3 tiers. It's not an accident that most of the products we buy as a cloud service or cloud service offering or online have these 3 tiers. They have some kind of very basic package that looks like it does some things that are valuable, but just not quite what you want. They'll also have on the other end a premium offering that does all kinds of things, way more than you need at a price point, way more than you're willing to pay. And then there's this just right Goldilocks price in the middle. Sometimes it's called bronze, silver, gold. Sometimes it's basic, standard, premium. Whatever the tier nomenclature is, it's really just providing this way to say you have choices, but the one in the middle is the one that really fits. And research has shown that when people are presented with choices, there's what's called a centrality bias. They're going to go towards that middle option. It's going to feel like the best value for their money. So to summarize, just pricing for service-based systems, you want to focus on deliverables. You want to emphasize extras and features and value, and then a clear price for that value. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people not get a sale because it was really confusing to the customer what they were buying and how much it would cost. Until you can say, you're going to get this box and it has these 4 things in it, and it costs this much. Until you're able to do that, it's very difficult for a customer to say yes. It's very easy for them to say no if any one of those things are not clear. If you want to dig in deeper on this question, check out my video, How to 10x Your Hourly Rate. So how do you as a first-time business owner keep track of expenses? That's the question. First-time business owners, when they're just getting started, they might be a hobbyist, they might be an artist, they might be self-employed, they might be just trying out a side hustle. And so the whole idea of entrepreneurship or starting a new business can be really daunting. And keeping track of expenses can actually be one of the most daunting things, particularly if there's the kind of business where you have to invest a little bit to get up and running. I'm always favorable to businesses you can get started with $0 and really what they call bootstrapping, just starting with very little, almost getting to a point where you can generate some revenue, maybe by providing services. And then as expenses start to come in, you already have money to do that. But whether you start with some capital to get started with, or whether you start with $0 and you start to offer some services and start to make some money first, you're going to want to keep track of your expenses. And of course, the easy reason to think for needing to do this is eventually you'll have to pay taxes, or maybe you want to do a tax write-off. And I'm certainly not here to provide tax advice, but definitely a good idea to keep track for that purpose. But it's also really important if you're starting a new business to understand the cost of the business. So if you don't keep track of your expenses, you can be having a lot of money coming in, but you actually may not be making much or any money if you're not keeping track of your expenses, not keeping those under control. So what I want to do with this question is really point to what I'll call the cure for the starving artist. Oftentimes someone who's particularly has an art, whether it's music or some kind of medium, graphic design, video editing, photography, whatever it is, it can be exciting to start a business, but it also can be daunting. How do I make money? And tracking expenses can be really helpful. So let's say there's no money coming in yet. Well, really you want to then shoot for, how am I going to get some revenue so that I can cover my expenses? Because in the meantime, you have to accept what's called a burn rate. Any expenses you have, you're going to have to absorb yourself. A lot of times, if you're a hobbyist, let's say you're a photographer, you probably already have a camera. You probably already have certain equipment that you can use. And so to the degree you can just start with what you have, that's great, because you're not having to incur a lot of expenses. But along the way, you are going to incur some expenses, and you'll want to keep track of those. So some of the things you'll want to think about at the beginning are your startup costs. A lot of times a new entrepreneur will buy some equipment or buy some things to get started. They won't keep track of it and say, oh, I'll figure it out later. And that can actually be the highest expense in the first few months or the first year of the business. And you want to keep track of those receipts or keep track of those expenses so that you can, use that later to figure out how the business is doing and, for taxes and that sort of thing. So to get started, you may have materials, you may have equipment, you may have software. You may be asking the question, is it too early to start an LLC, a limited liability corporation, or should I just be a sole proprietor? The good news is when you're just getting started, you usually don't have to make that decision right away, especially if it's any kind of service-based business or if it's a craft or a piece of artwork that you're going to sell. Up front, you can operate as what's called a sole proprietor. Just want to keep track of those expenses and your revenue because you're going to need that information later. It is never too early to start tracking your expenses. So whether you use a spreadsheet, whether you use online bookkeeping tools, or anything like that, it's really important to get started early. And you may be saying, spreadsheets, online tools, I don't even know where to start. That sounds scary. No problem. There's some even simpler things that you can do. But if you are going to use a spreadsheet, you can use something like Excel or Google Sheets or Numbers from Apple. There are lots of good spreadsheet programs out there. There are even programs that are out there for small businesses that are built to help track expenses. QuickBooks is very popular. Also one called Zoho. There's one I've been experimenting with or getting to know about recently called Novo app. And it's for simple invoices and expenses management in one place. And it's actually a bank. So you get a checking account with it, and they provide a lot of the capabilities for the software for free. So that's one that's worth considering as well. But there's an even simpler way to get started. One thing that it was advice that my accountant gave me when I first started my first business, because I started to ask, should I get QuickBooks or what should I do? I was familiar with spreadsheets. I wasn't afraid to do that. But what he said to me is, start with just go get a bank account that you just use for this. He said, it doesn't even have to be a business bank account. It's just a bank account that you only use for this business. And what I did is when I opened the bank account, I also opened a debit card with that. So I had a card that I could use for purchases. But what he said was, any money you make or any money you're going to invest in the business, put it in that bank account. Any expenses you have, use that bank account for the expense and for the purchase. Because what that meant was that the bank statement itself actually could serve as my P&L statement, my profit and loss statement. I could see all the money that came in, all the money that went out. And so without really getting into any detail about how to manage cash flow or to do record keeping, doing this one simple thing can get you started where you have a clean record of everything with the business. If you're going to do it this way, it's really important that you don't put money into the account that you don't consider to be just part of the business. It's also important that you don't use the money in the account to pay for anything that's personal, that's not part of the business. Because anytime you start to move those two things together, it can get very confusing. If you want to get a deeper dive on this, I did a video a little while back called Stop Commingling Your Funds This Year that goes into a lot more detail about how to set this up, and also some of the risks that come with almost using a business like a personal piggy bank. It's not just a problem from a tax perspective. It gets very, very hard to determine whether the business is successful or not as well. Later, you may want to enlist the services of a bookkeeper, a tax preparer, or even a certified public accountant. But you don't need to do that just yet, but there will be some advantages to doing that later. And by doing the simple thing of starting a bank account and keeping everything in one place, or starting to do some basic tracking through a spreadsheet or one of the software applications that I mentioned, this can really help you to be prepared to bring on someone like that, and they can start to be useful very early. They're going to be able to help you to avoid some pitfalls in the long term. And so I definitely recommend you prepare to bring on this type of expertise when you have the funds to do so. As your business grows, your bookkeeping will get more complex, particularly if you're successful. But keeping track of each expense from day one is going to pay big dividends. It's really going to help you to avoid some colossal headaches. As I said, if you want to learn more about this, check out my video, Stop Commingling Your Funds This Year. How much should you put away for future expenses as a new business owner? This question comes up so frequently, particularly for those that are getting started and they're not sure yet how much revenue will be coming in. Oftentimes, a business gets started because someone sees an opportunity to sell something or to get hired to provide some services. And so there's some revenue that comes in initially, and then it is unclear when revenue will come in again. And yet there may be some expenses. Even small things like software subscriptions and that sort of thing. So estimating starting costs can be really important when you're getting started, just getting a sense up front how much you're going to need to get started. I always say, failure is so frequent with new businesses. And the one thing you never want to fail to do is to do the math, the simple things that you can figure out ahead of time to realize, like, am I going to be able to consistently make money profitably in this business? So estimating those starting costs. The second thing is dealing with what I'll call seasonality or inconsistency. So inconsistency is inevitable when a business just gets started. You're just figuring out who your customers are. You're just figuring out how to bring value. Your offer may not even be all that clear yet. And so it's very uncertain whether you're going to make a little bit or even a bit more in any given month. But oftentimes it's even not a lot coming in. As a business gets up and running and starts to run more consistently, what you may discover over time is there are certain seasonal trends, or what I'll call seasonality, to your business. And it really doesn't matter what kind of business you have. If you're in the apparel or retail business, of course, you're going to see a lot higher expenses around the end of the year, around the holidays. Oftentimes, maybe at back to school or beginning of summer, there are going to be particular times where there's a lot more happening. Or if you have a service or a product or offering that is related to a particular season, you may have a spike at that part of the year, and it may be that your revenue is much lower throughout the year. So as your business progresses, as you have success, you want to have good tracking around your revenue to make sure you understand places where you may have this kind of seasonality. It may have something to do with who your customers are, so it will give you insights about how to run the business. But it also gives you some idea of what you need to think about in terms of setting up reserves to deal with those inconsistencies and that seasonality. If you're bootstrapping, and what I mean by that is if you're starting from zero, or $0, you're going to have to make an initial investment unless you can start a services business where you can get paid just for your expertise before you have to invest anything. That was actually one of the things, my first consulting business, someone asked me if I would provide coaching services for them on a monthly basis. So I was able to say yes. I put together a program and said, here's the program and here's the price. And they wrote me a check. And so I had enough money to get the business started right from that first coaching opportunity. And so as I worked with that person who substantially increased and grew their business over time, I was able to use that first project and the fee from that to be the starting capital for the business. But if you don't have that situation, you're going to want to plan for, what money do I need to start with to get started? And you may even from that very beginning start with, I'm going to set a cash reserve. Maybe it's something small, like a few $100s. They're going to say, that's my cash reserve. And I want to build that up over time. Two things to think about. First, how consistent are your operating costs? Are you finding that your costs are more tied to when you get a project for a customer, you have some costs associated with that? Or are you having to sign up for costs that you're then going to have to pay on an ongoing basis? If you need to lease space, or if you need to have a platform that you're using that has a monthly subscription fee, these are the kinds of things that turn into ongoing costs. So you need to account for those in your operations. You also want to have a bit of a buffer. Are those costs, can we set aside 3 months worth of those expenses, so if there is a dip in revenue or an unexpected cost, can continue to pay those bills without having to go into debt or really getting into a situation where you may be insolvent. So the second thing to think about is just, if revenue is inconsistent, why is that? Are you ramping up sales, or is it seasonality? So things that we talked about a moment ago. A rule of thumb is, if you have a variability to kind of low point, high point, you want to find that highest point in your expenses and then set aside 3 months at that level. So let's say that on average, your expenses range between $500 and $1,500 per month. In a perfect world, what you would do is you take that $1,500 high point and times 3 and get to a point where you have $4,500 sitting in reserve. Another way you might do is just take the average of the 3 months, or the total of the 3 months, and divide that out by the 3. That can be another way to do it. It's a smaller reserve, but maybe a little bit more attainable. And it may be that these are even stair steps. You start out with a little bit, and then you go for start to get to where, even in the lowest month, I want to be able to know I can cover my costs, and then save towards the average, and then eventually towards that 3 months at the peak. And that's probably sufficient to operate. If you're going to have an expense that really goes beyond that, or something's going to change in the business, you have a little bit of time to absorb that, plan for it, and make decisions about it. The main thing is, be sure to set aside some cash reserve to avoid a cash emergency. Because the worst thing is when you run out of cash because your expenses were normal or maybe a little bit higher than normal, and your revenue dipped, and now all of a sudden you have used up all the cash you have. And then it's even more difficult to get back into the game because you don't have capital to invest in the next step in the business. What systems or technology are most important as you get ready to launch a startup? I get this question from accidental entrepreneurs of all kinds, and it can be overwhelming because as you're getting started, there are just so many things to think about. And so I would like to describe this or respond to this just in terms of a starting tech stack. So think of the technology, the systems that you begin with as your tech stack. And there are some things that you want to have in place right from the beginning. The areas that I'll focus on are bookkeeping, also marketing or sales, and then operations. And then I'll say business-specific technologies. So with bookkeeping, you're going to want to use some kind of a system to keep track of your expenses, to keep track of your revenue, and to really plan out how cash is going to flow through the business. Ideally, using a software that's designed for bookkeeping can be a really good place to start because the cost is relatively low and they're very easy to use. QuickBooks is by and large the most used in the bookkeeping space. If you have an invoicing type business, you can use that to send an invoice out. You can use it to track all of your expenses. With the right kind of subscription, you can even connect it to your bank account for automatic reconciliation. So that can be a very good technology to use in the bookkeeping space. Another one that I really like, it's very popular among small business owners, is Zoho. Zoho really does a lot of different things. It's kind of a one-stop shop for running a business. So the monthly fee is a bit higher than things like QuickBooks or others, but you can use it for a CRM, you can use it for bookkeeping, you can use it for marketing and sales. It has a lot of different possible uses. And so this can be a good place to go and get one piece of technology that can manage different parts of the business. I've mentioned before, Novo app is one that's particularly useful if you have a service-oriented business. So if you're providing services, maybe as a side hustle, or you're doing consulting or coaching or some kind of graphic or design or art type creation, these can be really managed well with this application called Novo app, because it handles invoicing the client or the customer. You can do subscription-based offerings, so you can set up automations. It will manage all of the money as it's coming through. You can even tie into Stripe and other things like that, so it can help you to manage the money itself. You can put in your expenses that give you reports and so forth. So it's very basic. It's not as robust as QuickBooks or Zoho would be, but it can be a good place to start, particularly if you have that services type business. The next part of the tech stack I would recommend would be the marketing and sales side of your business. And these are two very different things, but a lot of the technologies that you would use early on in your business will help to address some of the first needs for both of these. So I would start with some kind of a website or landing page that you can use to demonstrate to customers that you exist, and to give information. Ultimately, you really want, in the past, websites were very robust and had lots of pages. Today, really all you need when you're getting started is a landing page that identifies what you do, like what the value is that you create to customers and who you are, and then really a call to action. A lot of times it can just be, click here to book a free consultation. It can be click here to get a price quote. It could be put your email address in here to get more information, whatever it is, that call to action. And so a landing page builder site like Squarespace or Wix can be very helpful in getting this first page out there. I'm also very fond of one called card.co, CARRD.co, card.co. Card.co is a free website builder. You can actually do 3 landing pages with the free subscription, and they're very good for this, almost like a business card on the web, or a very simple web landing page with a call to action. Graphic design is another piece that's really important when you're getting started. You don't necessarily have the funds to hire a graphic designer or even use a consultant yet, but you are going to want to create some visual artifacts for your business that are going to help for your website landing page, whether it's brochures, any kind of documentation that you're putting out there. You want to be able to brand that. So a good place to start would be a platform like Canva, which I use heavily. I also occasionally use Adobe Express. These are both very easy to use, very, very low cost, and even have free versions that you can use to get started. So I'd highly recommend, if you're not already using those, adding those to your tech stack to support your marketing and sales. Customer magnets and other ways to build an email list or to start to draw in prospective customers can be really important. So what I used early on was one called ConvertKit, or now called Kit. A lot of companies will use MailChimp. I've since switched to Kajabi because I do a lot of online learning and online coaching and communities. And so Kajabi really manages these well. In addition, has some good tools for creating landing pages, creating forms for setting up email lists, and so forth. ConvertKit will allow you to do a lot of your customer magnet and email list management, or even a newsletter management for free, up to 1,000 contacts. So this can be a really good place to start if you've never used one before. It's very easy to use, and you're able to use it for free while you're getting up and running. And a lot of times, once you've exceeded their limits of 1,000 contacts, you've already started to generate some revenue, and that can justify the cost of the platform that you use. Finally, in the marketing and sales category, I would strongly recommend some kind of CRM, customer relationship management software or platform. Most are now provided as cloud apps that you can run from your phone, from a mobile device, from a laptop. So they're very easy to use, and they help you to make sure you're capturing customer information. They're also helping you to keep track of when and how you've interacted with customers, so that you can ensure that you are being attentive to customers, and you can ensure that you're providing a consistent customer experience. Some very popular ones are HubSpot, Insightly, and Zoho. HubSpot is one that is most widely used by smaller businesses. It is getting more and more capable, which is a fancy way of saying it's getting more complex. So it does more than it has in the past. It's getting more involved in terms of how to use it. So the learning curve is going up. It has a very nice free offering or free package for new businesses that are getting started. And so you can get started with that one. You can always move to a different one later. I like HubSpot because it's very functional and it's free up to a certain point. And then at the same time, it is a little bit harder to use. It takes some time to get used to it. Insightly is another good option. There's no longer a free version. It originally came as a free version, which was exceptional. However, now you do have to pay for it. And so it is very easy to use, very user-friendly, very small business owner, and really I would say first-time small business owner friendly. But you do have to pay a fee for it. But I would say if you have the resources, it's well worth looking at that one. And of course, I mentioned before, Zoho is a platform that's built for small business owners. And it really is a one-stop shop for everything from bookkeeping, CRM, email management, customer magnets, all those kinds of things. So that can be a good option as well. It's the most costly of the three I've mentioned here when you're getting started. But at the same time, it would allow you to do the same thing from one platform related to CRM, related to customer magnets, email list development, landing page, just the management of the customer experience and bookkeeping all under one platform. So again, that can be a good choice as well. Now let's talk about your tech stack in terms of operations. Operations is really how you organize yourself and how you make sure things are getting done so that you're sure to have that consistency in terms of what you're delivering to customers, how you're delivering it to customers, and the experience that they have. So there are a lot of popular applications out there, things like Asana, Trello, Notion. I would say when you're first getting started, if you want to avoid a learning curve on a platform, the Google Suite provides a lot of good tools that can help you to get organized and stay organized. So there's a lot of good options there. Each of the apps I mentioned will provide you with activity planning, project management, task monitoring, task lists, and so forth. I'm particularly fond of a platform called 90.io. And I use this one because it's not only good when you're first getting started, but it is a really good platform as you get bigger. It's particularly good if you are establishing a leadership team and you're starting to bring a number of people into the organization and you want to be able to get clear on where it is you're going from a vision perspective, what your goals and objectives are in a year, a quarter, a month, a week, and also have that coordination with a leadership team with each of those individuals leading others. So if you really expect that you're going to scale quickly and you're going to have a lot of people involved, 90.io can be a really good way to not just manage your tasks, but also look at the big picture in terms of how you're managing your tasks together. But ultimately, what you're going to do for operations is you want to establish a vision, you want to establish structure, and then specific objectives. From there, your operating system is going to be comprised of the policies you create, the procedures you identify, and the standard operating procedures that you create for everything that happens. And that way, as you bring people into the mix, no matter how many people you have or if you have new people, everything is being done the same way. So having an application like 90.io to make sure that you're managing that well and you're keeping track of not only the individual task level work that needs to be done, but the bigger picture, how that connects to all the other objectives, that can be really, really helpful. And so those are the things you want to think about in terms of technology for your operating system. In keeping with bootstrapping, when you're developing your tech stack, you want to keep it lean. You want to keep it as light as you can. You want to use as few technologies as possible and learn how to use them really, really well. But it's really an experimentation process. You're going to iterate even the way you use these tools in the business. And so you want to do little experiments, see what's working and keep doing that and building on that. And when something doesn't work, you want to actually delete that from the process or change it or remove it in some way. And as you go, each step of the way, you're learning and you want to build on this learning. So those are just a few thoughts on how you can develop a tech stack and the systems to put in place as you're launching a new business to make sure that you can be consistent, you can provide the value that you hope to your customers, and that you can do it in a way that's profitable over time. As someone starting a new business, how do you hire independent contractors? This question comes up a lot, particularly with agency type services. So graphic designers, video editors, photographers, copywriters. And there's a reason why independent contractors are important, particularly when a new business is getting started. One of the most important reasons, in my opinion, is buying back your time. So you have 168 hours every week. And so that's a great opportunity, but it also is what I call the 168-hour problem. That's all you have. You only have 168 hours. And so when you're starting a new business, areas where you can buy back your time allows you to invest more in the business to go further and get more done. So getting fractional expertise can be a very helpful way to do this, or hiring independent contractors to provide additional bandwidth. So these are really the reasons why you would hire an independent contractor, because it's going to provide stability. It gives you business support for the business itself. It helps you to address maybe weak spots that you have in your own capabilities. It also provides you the ability to expand capacity, both your capacity for yourself, so you're getting someone else to do some of your busy work, and that gives you the capacity to do more. But you may even find that you can hire independent contractor resources that become part of your product, and you can actually mark up those services and make money on them, allowing you to expand what you do. So the real challenge can be finding the right contractors. So this can really begin with the question of what is the reason you're hiring someone? So clarify which reason it is that you're hiring a particular contractor or someone for contract services. It may be that you have high value activities that you want to achieve, and you need to backfill that time with someone who can just do the other things that aren't as valuable. Alternatively, you may be hiring an independent contractor to be a gap filler, to fill in gaps that you have in the organization that you need to fill in order to be able to operate. So it could be gaps in your own skills, or it could be things that you need that just aren't within your area of focus or your expertise, and you want to bring those in. Yet another reason could be that you want to actually enhance your product. So recognizing what the reason is for hiring the contractor is really a key first thing, because you want to make sure you're hiring the right kind of contractor. If you're hiring someone that's going to be part of your product, you can't go cheap in that place, because they could end up doing work that's not up to your standards, and then that reflects badly on your brand. However, if they're working for you and they're doing maybe 80% of the quality that you would like, but they're doing it at a very low cost and it's not a big deal for you to fill in the rest, that's where the kind of contract resource you need may not need to have as high level of expertise or experience. In terms of finding someone, I am a big fan of starting with leveraging your own professional network. And you're going to do this for a couple of reasons. First, you're going to start with people you know, and you're going to ask them to introduce people they know, or perhaps people that they use. And so this can help you to find resources, but there's also a little bit of a built-in endorsement, hopefully, or at least there's a personal accountability when someone's introduced you. But ultimately, you still need to do your own due diligence to validate that the resource, the person that you're going to work with, has the ability to do the things you need them to do, and they're going to be able to communicate with you and work with you in a way that's constructive. For me, an important part of this due diligence is test projects. So asking someone to do a free or a discounted initial project, starting with, I have one project, let's work on that together. Let's see how that works out. Oftentimes when someone's trying to earn your business, they will gladly do that first project for free or at a dramatic discount so that they can show you what they're capable of, and you can figure out how you can best work together. But I would not make a commitment past this first project until you see results. And so this is where that first project may feel a little bit transactional, but you can even say going in, I'm doing this one project because I want to test out what you're able to do, and I want to see how we can work together. Ultimately, you want to compute or calculate the time value of the service that you're getting from an independent contractor. Definitely want to compare alternatives. Talk to at least 3 or 4 different contractors that could provide the services that you're looking for. Number one, figuring out What's their cost structure? How do they charge for their services? Does that align with the value you're getting? And does it fit in terms of the maturity of your business or the needs that you have? If it's going into your product, are you able to incorporate that service and still have a reasonable profit margin and so forth? So doing these calculations up front can be really helpful, and comparing what different providers offer will give you a way to really ensure you're working with someone that does what you need at a price you can afford and in a way where you can work together with them in the long term, maybe even developing them in a way that increases the value they bring to you. Contractors can be a very necessary part of growth. Employees and hiring employees can be very complicated and expensive, and it really brings on a whole layer of administration. Whereas using a 1099 resource on a limited basis to deliver projects and specific expertise can be a good way to get moving initially in a way that fits where your business is at. But there can be risks in terms of quality, reliability, and loyalty, because a contractor is really just seeing each project that you do together as a gig, and they may have other clients and competing priorities that you would get potentially higher levels of loyalty from an employee. So down the road, you may have to look at whether a contractor you're working with is a good long-term solution, or maybe it's that they're one of your first employees, or at some point you make a transition away from contract labor into those that are more committed to the long-term engagement and success of the business. But at the beginning, as you're just getting started, the effective use of contractors can help you to do more, to do your work faster, and to achieve market traction more quickly in ways that you just can't do on your own. How do you, as a small business owner, let go of control over parts of the business that don't really require input? In my experience, the most successful founders and small business owners and entrepreneurs want to be in the driver's seat. But growth requires achieving outcomes through others. In this way, I often say entrepreneurship is a team sport. That isn't to say that there aren't successful entrepreneurs that work on their own. Sometimes they're called solopreneurs, but oftentimes they're really self-employed, and they maybe have used automation, they maybe have used systems or even contractors to allow them to get to a certain level. But in time, those who want to grow entrepreneurial businesses and who are successful doing so bring others into the organization and really work to achieve through them. Letting go in this way is as much a decision and a state of mind as it is a set of skills or techniques, though it can be both. Where it really starts, though, is making a decision. Are you going to go big and scale up, or are you going to stay small and be a solo entrepreneur or self-employed? If your answer is scale up, you need to get out of the business. You may re-enter later as an employee, and at that point you can re-enter in the place where you most want to be. But you need to get to a place where you can work on the business instead of working in the business, or at least mostly on the business rather than in the business. And this can be very, very difficult, especially if you spend a lot of time developing, building, and expanding a business. Once you've made that decision, then you can really focus on how you will make this transition so that you're in a position where you can let go of parts of the organization and parts of the process that don't require your input. One of the most important parts of this is building an operating system. This is finding talented people and bringing them into the organization, but also establishing a clear vision and creating systems, processes, and standard operating procedures, and making sure that the people that are stepping into those are operating them properly so that the business is running the way that you want it to. There's a number of reasons for this. First, you need to make sure that you are delivering the value that you've promised to your customers in a consistent way that delights them so that they're going to keep buying from you and tell others as well. And you want that system to be self-sustaining so that even new sales are coming in without a lot of input from you. And customers are happy because of the value that they're getting over time. And they're referring others so the business can grow from a revenue perspective. But as you bring more people in, you want to make sure that they're delivering that same value promise in the way that you would have if you were doing it yourself. So in this way, you want to find the right people, you want to get them into the right roles, and you really want to implement this operating system based on your vision, the systems, processes, and procedures that you want people to follow, and then a measurement process to make sure that those are working the exact same way and the way that they're intended every time. From there, you can look for ways to enhance, maybe even reduce, simplify, or make more efficient the whole process so that you're getting exactly what your customers need and the value to them and the experience that they're looking for, but you're also able to do it profitably. And so that enhancement process can be an ongoing start, stop, continue exercise to say, what are we not doing now that we need to do to make this better? What are we doing now that's not providing a lot of value or it's costly, too costly that we could stop? And what are the things that are working well that we want to keep doing? Once you've done this, then get out of the way. It's time to step back and really let the system run. And then you can think about where you want to re-enter the organization. You may enter as an employee, as the manager, leader, overseer, so that executive level person, whether the president, CEO, whatever title is appropriate for the organization, but you can then take on that role, but doing it within the confines of the role and the measurements that you've put in place for that role. That's going to make it easier later to install someone else in that role. And the business is already going to be used to paying you what should be a market rate for that space and you doing the work that's expected there. And so that will lead to an easier transition. A book that I often recommend to not just startup founders who are just getting started, but even companies that have been in business for a longer period of time, but founders who are thinking, I want to really work on my business rather than in it, or I want to step out of my business and turn it over to professional management, or even sell the business. And the book that I often recommend is Built to Sell. And this book is really about preparing a business to sell without the owner or the CEO ending up in what's called an earnout, where they have to continue to work for a long period of time after the business is sold to make sure that it can be transitioned to another owner. And so really creating the kind of business that is ready to sell from day one means that that owner is free to work on the business, knowing that the day-to-day is solid and being able to step away when the timing's right to do there. So even if you stay for a lifetime, it will free you up to run the business and work on the business rather than being bogged down by the day-to-day of running the business. If you recently started a business or you're getting ready to launch, these are 6 questions that you should consider immediately. Being purposeful in the way that you run your business will increase your level of success. It's going to allow you to really focus on your highest value activities and do the most for the business without being bogged down in the day-to-day of running the business, leveraging the resources of others, using the right technologies, and really having the right systems and processes to be able to be effective. But at the center of this whole process is your customer. Who are they? What is it that's very specific and unique about them? And what is the specific and unique value that you bring to them as a customer? The more you can develop your company to deliver that consistently over time without your direct input, the more you're going to be able to thrive as a business owner, and you're actually more likely to be able to grow the business and do more with it as a result. I'll leave you with this one secret about launching a new business. You don't have to be an experienced business leader or an MBA to be successful. In fact, many of the most successful startup founders I know or have worked with never went to business school. The secret is to get started. Focus on the customer, deliver unique value to them in a way that they are excited about what you do, and build on this success as you go. If you're planning to start a new business this year, I'd like to share with you a free download of my 21 days to launch checklist. There's a link in the description below, and this will walk through day by day what you can do every day for 21 days to get from an idea that's in your head to a business that's ready to launch. If you have questions about any of the topics that we talked about in this video, or if you'd like to get more information, please make a comment below. Don't wait to get your business started. In fact, don't go to sleep tonight until you've launched your business. Get started.